The Book of Esther, Chapter 5. And on the third day Esther put on her royal apparel, and stood in the court of the king's palace within, over against the king's house. And the king sat upon his royal throne in the king's palace, over against the gate of the house. And when the king saw Esther the queen standing in the court, she found favor in his sight. And the king held out the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drew near, and touched the top of the scepter. Then said the king unto her, What wilt thou, Queen Esther? And what is thy request? It shall be given thee to the half of the kingdom. Then said Esther, If it please the king, let the king and Haman come this day unto the banquet that I have prepared for him. And the king said, Cause Haman to make haste, that he may do as Esther had said. So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. And the king said unto Esther at the banquet of wine, What is thy petition, that it may be given thee? And what is thy request? It shall even be performed unto the half of the kingdom. Then answered Esther and said, My petition and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to give me my petition, and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them, and I will do tomorrow according to the king's saying. Then went Haman forth the same day joyfully, and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he stood not up nor moved for him, then was Haman full of indignation at Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman refrained himself, and when he came home he sent and called for his friends, and Zeresh his wife. And Haman told them all the glory of his riches, and the multitude of his children, and all the things wherein the king had promoted him, and how that he had set him above the princes and servants of the king. Haman said moreover, Yea, Esther the queen did let no man come in with the king to the banquet that she had prepared, save me. And tomorrow I am bidden unto her also with the king. But all this doth nothing avail me, as long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Then said Zeresh his wife, and all his friends unto him, Let them make a tree of 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak thou unto the king, that Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Then shalt thou go joyfully with the king unto the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, and he caused to make the tree. Esther chapter 6. The same night the king slept not, and he commanded to bring the book of the records, and the chronicles, and they were read before the king. Then it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs, keepers of the door, who sought to lay hands on the king Ahasuerus. Then the king said, What honor and dignity hath been given to Mordecai for this? And the king's servants that ministered unto him said, There is nothing done for him. And the king said, Who is in the court? Now Haman was come into the inner court of the king's house, that he might speak unto the king, to hang Mordecai on the tree that he had prepared for him. And the king's servants said unto him, Behold, Haman standeth in the court. And the king said, Let him come in. And when Haman came in, the king said unto him, What shall be done unto the man whom the king will honor? Then Haman thought in his heart, To whom would the king do honor more than to me? And Haman answered the king, The man whom the king would honor, let them bring for him royal apparel, which the king useth to wear, and the horse that the king rideth upon, and the crown royal may be set upon his head. And let the raiment and the horse be delivered by the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, and let them apparel him, the man whom the king will honor, and cause him to ride upon the horse through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, Thus shall it be done unto the man whom the king will honor. Then the king said unto Haman, Make haste, take the raiment and the horse, as thou hast said, and do so unto Mordecai the Jew, that sitteth at the king's gate, let nothing fail of all that thou hast spoken. So Haman took the raiment and the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, and brought him on the horseback through the street of the city, and proclaimed before him, Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king will honor. And Haman told Zeresh his wife and all his friends all that had befallen him. Then said his wise men and Zeresh his wife unto him, If Mordecai be of the seed of the Jews, before whom thou hast begun to fall, thou shalt not prevail against him, but shalt surely fall before him. And while they were yet talking with him, came the king's eunuchs, and hasted to bring Haman unto the banquet that Esther had prepared. Esther chapter 7. So the king and Haman came to the banquet with the queen Esther. And the king said again unto Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine, What is thy petition, Queen Esther, that it may be given thee? And what is thy request? It shall even be performed unto half of the kingdom. And Esther the queen answered and said, If I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. But if we were sold for servants and for handmaids, I would have held my tongue, although the adversary could not recompense the king's loss. Then King Ahasuerus answered and said unto the queen Esther, Who is he, and where is he that presumeth to do this? And Esther said, The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. And the king arose from the banquet of wine in his wrath, and went into the palace garden. But Haman stood up to make request for his life to the queen Esther, for he saw that there was mischief prepared for him of the king. And when the king came again out of the palace garden into the house where they drank wine, Haman was fallen upon the bed whereupon Esther sat. Therefore the king said, Will he force the queen also before me in the house? As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. And Harbona, one of the eunuchs, said in the presence of the king, Behold, there standeth yet the tree in Haman's house, 50 cubits high, which Haman had prepared for Mordecai, that spake good for the king. Then the king said, Hang him thereon. So they hanged Haman on the tree that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified. Esther chapter 8. The same day did King Ahasuerus give the house of Haman, the adversary of the Jews, unto Queen Esther. And Mordecai came before the king, for Esther told what he was unto her. And the king took off his ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it unto Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. And Esther spake yet more before the king, and fell down at his feet, weeping, and besought him that he would put away the wickedness of Haman the Agagite, and his device that he had imagined against the Jews. And the king held out the golden scepter toward Esther. Then Esther arose and stood before the king, and said, If it please the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the thing be acceptable before the king, and I please him, let it be written, that the letters of the device of Haman the son of Hammedatha the Agagite may be called again, which he wrote to destroy the Jews, and are in all the king's provinces. For how can I suffer and see the evil that shall come upon my people? Or how can I suffer and see the destruction of my kindred? And King Ahasuerus said unto the Queen Esther, and to Mordecai the Jew, Behold, I have given Esther the house of Haman, whom they have hanged upon the tree, because he laid hand upon the Jews. Write ye also for the Jews, as it liketh you in the king's name, and seal it with the king's ring. For the writings written in the king's name, and sealed with the king's ring, may no man revoke. Then were the king's scribes called at the same time, even in the 3rd month, that is the month Sivan, on the 23 day thereof, and it was written, according to all as Mordecai commanded, unto the Jews and to the princes, and captains and rulers of the provinces, which were from India even unto Ethiopia, 127 provinces, unto every province according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their speech, and to the Jews according to their writing, and according to their language. And he wrote in King Ahasuerus' name, and sealed it with the king's ring. And he sent letters by posts on horseback, and that rode on beasts of price as dromedaries and colts of mares, wherein the king granted the Jews, in what cities soever they were, to gather themselves together, and to stand for their life, and to root out, to slay, and to destroy all the power of the people and of the province that vexed them, both children and women, and to spoil their goods, upon one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, even in the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. The copy of the writing was, how there should be a commandment given in all and every province, published among all the people, and that the Jews should be ready against that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. So the posts rode upon beasts of price, dromedaries, and went forth with speed to execute the king's commandment. And the decree was given at Shushan palace. And Mordecai went out from the king in royal apparel of blue and white, and with a great crown of gold, and with a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. And unto the Jews was come light and joy and gladness and honor. Also in all and every province, and in all and every city and place, where the king's commandment and his decree came, there was joy and gladness to the Jews, a feast and good day. And many of the people of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews fell upon them. Esther chapter 9. So in the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, upon the 13th day of the same, when the king's commandment and his decree drew near to be put in execution, in the day that the enemies of the Jews hoped to have power over them, but it turned contrary, for the Jews had rule over them that hated them. The Jews gathered themselves together into their cities throughout all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, to lay hand on such as sought their hurt, and no man could withstand them, for the fear of them fell upon all people. And all the rulers of the provinces, and the princes, and the captains, and the officers of the king exalted the Jews, for the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. For Mordecai was great in the king's house, and the report of him went through all the provinces. For this man Mordecai waxed greater and greater. Thus the Jews smote all their enemies with strokes of the sword, and slaughter and destruction, and did what they would unto those that hated them. And at Shushan the palace slew the Jews and destroyed 500 men, and Parshandatha, and Dalphon, and Aspatha, and Poratha, and Adaliah, and Aradatha, and Parmashta, and Arisai, and Aridai, and Bajazapha, and the 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the adversary of the Jews, slew they, but they laid not their hands on the spoil. On the same day came the number of those that were slain into the palace of Shushan before the king. And the king said unto Queen Esther, The Jews have slain in Shushan the palace, and destroyed 500 men, and the 10 sons of Haman. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? And what is thy petition, that it may be given thee? Or what is thy request, moreover, that it may be performed. Then said Esther, If it please the king, let it be granted also tomorrow to the Jews that are in Shushan to do according unto this day's decree, that they may hang upon the tree Haman's 10 sons. And the king charged to do so, and the decree was given at Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. So the Jews that were in Shushan assembled themselves upon the 14th day of the month of Adar, and slew 300 men in Shushan. But on the spoil they laid not their hand. And the rest of the Jews that were in the king's provinces assembled themselves, and stood for their lives, and had rest from their enemies, and slew of them that hated them 75,000. But they laid not their hand on the spoil. This they did on the 13th day of the month Adar, and rested the 14th day thereof, and kept it a day of feasting and joy. But the Jews that were in Shushan assembled themselves on the 13th day and on the 14th day thereof, and they rested on the 15th day of this same, and kept it a day of feasting and joy. Therefore the Jews of the villages that dwelt in the unwalled towns kept the 14th day of the month of Adar with joy and fasting, even a joyful day, and everyone sent presents unto his neighbor. And Mordecai wrote these words, and sent letters unto all the Jews that were through all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, both near and far, enjoining them that they should keep the 14th day of the month of Adar, and the 15th day of the same every year, according to the days wherein the Jews rested from their enemies, and the month which was turned unto them from sorrow to joy, from mourning into a joyful day, to keep them the days of feasting and joy, and to send presents every man to his neighbor, and gifts to the poor. And the Jews promised to do as they had begun, and as Mordecai had written unto them, because Haman the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, all the Jews' adversaries, had imagined against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast pur, that is a lot, to consume and destroy them. And when she came before the king, he commanded by letters, Let this wicked device, which he imagined against the Jews, turn upon his own head, and let them hang him and his sons on the tree. Therefore they called these days Purim, by the name of Pur, and because of all the words of this letter, and of that which they had seen besides this, and of that which had come unto them. The Jews also ordained and promised for them, and for their seed, and for all that joined unto them, that they would not fail to observe those 2 days every year, according to their writing, and according to their season, and that these days should be remembered, and kept throughout every generation, and every family, and every province, and every city. Even these days of Purim should not fail among the Jews, and the memorial of them should not perish from their seed. And the Queen Esther, the daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jew, wrote with all authority to confirm this letter of Purim the second time. And he sent letters unto all the Jews to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus, with words of peace and truth, to confirm these days of Purim according to their seasons, as Mordecai the Jew and Esther the queen had appointed them, and as they had promised for themselves and for their seed with fasting and prayer. And the decree of Esther confirmed these words of Purim, and was written in the book. Esther chapter 10. And the king Ahasuerus laid a tribute upon the land, and upon the isles of the sea, and all the acts of his power and of his might, and the declaration of the dignity of Mordecai, wherewith the king magnified him. Are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia? For Mordecai the Jew was the second unto King Ahasuerus, and great among the Jews, and accepted among the multitude of his brethren, who procured the wealth of his people, and spake peaceably to all his seed.